I'm gonna tell you a secret. If you find yourself struggling to enjoy Andrew Garfield's The Amazing Spider-Man, it might be because you're thinking about them in the wrong way. The secret to enjoying the TASM movies is understanding that, especially in the first movie, they are not trying to give you a Spider-Man origin that is entirely accurate. In the end, what they succeed to do with this new take is particularly interesting, while also not different enough that you don't get too different of a result from the comic book counterpart. When you look closer, you realize that Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man is a take on the character that suffers from heavy abandonment issues, and this idea affects his origin story in a very interesting way. And there's so much more than just this story beat for Spider-Man, so if you stick around, I can show you so much more cool shit about this movie. And then I'll shit on the next one. If you stick around even longer after that, honestly you should probably subscribe. You like Spider-Man, and it's the only thing I talk about, now get over here. TASM 1 is a movie with a killer look and feel, with a soundtrack fit for a young, angry teen trying to learn how to be a hero. TASM 2, on the other hand, is going to be a lot harder to sell you on, so let's just keep talking about TASM 1 for now, and forget I said anything, bitch! One of the biggest criticisms lobbed at this movie was the subplot about Peter Parker's parents. In this first movie, the movie opens up with Peter Parker's parents leaving Peter in the care of Aunt May and Uncle Ben, who soon after end up dying in a plane crash. Peter then spends the entire first half of the movie searching through his father's past and teaming up with his old lab assistant before his Uncle Ben is tragically killed. Look, in the first movie, I think this subplot is completely fine. Peter's feelings of neglect from his father fuel his character. It makes Uncle Ben's death more tragic when you realize that Peter was spending so much time searching for information about his father and trying to fill that hole with other people like Kirk Connors that he lost the most important and only father figure he ever had. Uncle Ben in this movie, for the most part, is really solid. In this adaptation, he feels less like a symbol of good and justice and more just like a regular guy who wasn't really all that perfect.
Come on, I know a right cross when I see one.
Uncle Ben is a working class man who's maybe a bit rough around the edges, but you can tell he wants to do good. His scene where he's angry at Peter and lectures him about responsibility is essentially his moment where he relays his great message upon him.
You're a lot like your father. You really are, Peter, and that's a good thing. But your father lived by a philosophy, a principle, really. He believed that if you could do good things for other people, you had a moral obligation to do those things. That's what's at stake here. Not choice, responsibility.
Now let's actually talk about Peter. Peter in this movie is definitely not a nerdy kid. I won't even lie to you about that. I wouldn't even go as far as to say he's a geek or anywhere near as nerdy as Toby was. Andrew Garfield in this movie is definitely the coolest and hottest and sexiest Spider-Man that has been in his high school years. Oh god, wait. FBI, open up! To stick up for this specific adaptation a bit, first of all, he's played by Andrew Garfield. I don't have to explain myself. Second of all, he has way more of an attitude than most adaptations, which actually makes Peter Parker more accurate to the source material. Spider-Man isn't supposed to be some nerdy pushover who will let people walk all over him. Spider-Man is a trash talker who will piss you off and argue with you if he thinks you're wrong, even to the point of whooping your ass if he has to. So now that I've talked about Andrew's Peter a bit more, let's get into discussing Peter's origin more in depth. So, Peter is of course left by his parents, and once Peter grows up and finds his father's old files, he spends the entire first half of the movie searching for his father. This in turn causes him to sneak into Oscorp and get bitten by a lab spider, while also meeting the man who worked with his father. Peter discovers this bite gave him powers, and he hasn't really been doing much with them besides using them to bully his bullies. That wasn't what I meant to say in the script, I just mixed up the words. I was supposed to say clown on his bullies, but it actually makes more sense the other way around. It's not until the death of Uncle Ben that Peter actually decides to use his powers to do something meaningful. He makes up this persona and costume for one sole reason: to hunt down the man who killed Uncle Ben. As Peter's vendetta against men who look like Ben's killer rages on, he's invited to a dinner by his love interest, Gwen Stacy. Alright, stop applauding, this is my video, stop! There he has a confrontation with her father, the police chief, where Peter says he believes that Spider-Man is a hero. But Captain Stacy actually says something that's 100% true. Play the clip.
I stand for law and order, son. That's what I stand for, okay? I wear a badge. This guy wears a mask like an outlaw. He's hunting down a bunch of criminals that all look the same, like he's got some sort of personal vendetta. But he's not protecting innocent people, Mr. Parker.
Peter realizes he's right, which prepares him to save innocent lives on the bridge in the following scene. He saves a boy from certain death and gives him a chance to reunite with his father again. Blah, 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 high top reference. I know, he said it first. I know, he said the thing. He saves a boy from certain death and gives him a chance to reunite with his father again. Something Peter took for granted, spending his time searching for a father when he really had one the whole time. Uncle Ben. The truth is, Peter was never really alone, even if he felt that way. There were always people willing to accept him into their lives, but Peter just neglected them. When Peter gets home, he takes off his mask and he stares at it. This moment of self-reflection is the exact moment where Peter decides to do more than just search for the man who took his Uncle Ben. From now on, he's going to be a hero. That is Spider-Man's origin in this movie. Realize that it isn't trying to be accurate. While some aspects of it might be, it is not completely. It's not being accurate that automatically makes something good. It's whether that change being made is one that is interesting, and asking how far that change changes said adaptation from what it's supposed to be basing itself on. And when you compare this idea to Spider-Man's origin story, you realize that Spider-Man's story is one about change. Changing your ways and becoming a better person when gifted with the power to help others. TASM 1 is about the same thing, but it also includes Peter's feelings of fatherlessness and lack of acceptance into his origin. While it uses different story beats to get there, in the end, you still get a pretty similar idea with new concepts brought in that are interesting. That is why TASM is a good adaptation. And also because the love interest in this movie is actually an extremely likable character for once, instead of being a bit of a bitch. These two hotties are super good for each other in this movie. And for the most part, it's a really good and cute love story. For the most part. You see, my biggest issue with TASM 1 is the ending of the movie. When Captain Stacy gives Peter his dying words,
So I want you to promise me something, okay? Leave Gwen out of it.
Peter follows his wish. He leaves Gwen to keep her safe and follows his dying wishes. But then at the end of the fucking movie, he starts flirting with her again. Like, what the fuck? Look, in my opinion, this was the worst way you could have done this. You either could have had A, Peter stays with Gwen, which greatly increases the narrative effects of Captain Stacy's ghosts in TASM 2 due to Peter actively disobeying his dying wish as the movie continues, or B, have Peter stay away from Gwen and have him get back with her during the scene before the Electro fight in TASM 2, or have her not be gotten back with at all, or some shit, and pull MJ in there. I don't fucking know. You casted her, but when you have Peter immediately get back with her at the end of the movie, it just sort of makes me feel like you didn't really know how you wanted this movie to end. So you just went all over the damn place. This ending is why TASM isn't a perfect movie. It struggles to land on its feet at the end, and the villain isn't really emotionally appealing, and his actions don't really come off as understandable. You need that emotional backing to care about his actions and truly understand his motivations in the movie. The whole reason why Kirk Connors becomes the Lizard in the first place is because he wants to get his arm back that he lost. He doesn't even turn into the Lizard on purpose. And then all of a sudden, he disappears into the sewer after his encounter with Spider-Man, and then starts plotting to turn the entire city into lizard people. Which I guess makes sense, because he dedicated his entire life to cross-species genetics to help people, and the lizard is just making him a little crazy. But I only know that because I know these movies like the back of my hand, and I watched them to write this video. The problem is that this movie doesn't do a good job of establishing emotion and making me care about these characters. Specifically this character. The movie's way of telling you why the villain is doing something is just by giving you background info on them and then letting them run off free to do whatever the writers want. The reason the Raimi movies had such good villains is because they put so much care into establishing emotional connections with their villains. Norman Osborn losing his company as he spirals into madness. Dr. Octopus failing his experiment and losing his wife. Sandman being arrested and made unable to see his sick daughter. Kirk Connors doesn't have an arm. And he's already a cross-species geneticist, so when he accidentally turns into Lizard Man, he wants to turn the entirety of society into lizard men. It just doesn't really hit as hard, you know what I mean? Like, I would have put up with a scene of him giving me a little more emotional substance. There's a lot of cut scenes of him that are emotional. Foreshadow. Now, all those criticisms aside, I still really, really love this movie. I never understood why everyone was so harsh on it, and even nowadays, I still don't really understand. It's not like this movie's issues stand at the forefront of what it is, unlike a other thing that I'm referencing that we'll cover next time. This movie is just really enjoyable. It's a darker, mostly visually and less narratively, and slightly more modern take on Spider-Man. And it's no secret that the second one has way less care put into it. So, TASM 2 isn't a movie I'd necessarily deem bad. The meanest I can be to this movie is say that it's mediocre. Because while it definitely struggles to flesh out its villains and tell a cohesive storyline, it manages to do several other things very, very well. Well, maybe very well? I'd probably take out the extra very. First off, this movie has a completely different tone from the first one. While the first one focused more on dark scenery and the occasional sunset, this film has much more of a brighter and less serious tone. This movie is absolutely held together by the charisma of its Spider-Man. While in the first movie, Andrew Garfield's Peter's antics felt much scarier to criminals due to the darker environments of the first movie, the costume design, and all that crotch whipping. Crotch! The second movie uses its lighter feel to make Spider-Man look much more like a cocky asshole, which is perfect. Yeah, but that's pretty much it. If you aren't currently watching whatever Spider-Man is doing in this movie, you're probably not enjoying what you're seeing, which I don't blame you. The entire movie is just filled with villains who could have had more interesting backstories and other crap you don't really want to watch. This movie literally starts with like a 10-minute scene of what happened to Peter's parents, which we pretty much did not need to see at all. There's nothing of importance being added to this movie with this entire Peter parent subplot. Essentially, you see them die at the beginning of the movie, and then Peter finds these tokens for an underground subway train layer, finds out that the spider that bit Peter was specifically made so it could only pass on its abilities to anyone in the Parker bloodline, and that's it. There's no grand conclusion, nothing to wrap up this story. There's totally not anything that was cut out of this movie that would have made this scene much more climactic. This subplot doesn't contribute to the movie at all. It doesn't contribute to the finale or any of the current story plots going on after it's over. When it's done, it's just done. This goddamn plot line should have been left in TASM 1 if you were planning to cut out the most important scene in the goddamn storyline. I'm gonna talk about this scene. So, you're in the grave, you're in the fucking graveyard with Peter Parker, he's mourning the death of Gwen, okay? Of course, you see all the shit beforehand where he's discovering his parents and junk, and then Peter's dad just shows up. They talk about it, and I find the conversation kind of moving, kind of motivational, alright? And if you gave Peter this scene and turned this into the reason where he goes back into being Spider-Man, the Peter parent subplot still really sucks, but at least it means something. But when you take it away, it doesn't mean anything anymore, and it sucks when you leave the rest of the crap in. After Richard and Mary meet the ground at a lethal fucking speed, it shouldn't matter anymore. Anyway, they cut out the most important fucking part of this goddamn story arc. Fuck. Anyway, after Richard and Mary meet the ground at a lethal speed, the movie opens with literally the most fucking killer intro you have ever fucking seen in your goddamn life, and I swear to God this much expletives are entirely useful to explaining how cool this is. The spider logo fades in, and then the whole suit with the scenery. Fuck yeah, this shit is so fucking awesome. He's fucking flipping around and flying through the air and shit. You can hear the hoops and the hollers. You can see the wrinkles in the suit with the amazing CGI work that Marvel should still be doing. It looks fucking awesome. It sounds fucking awesome. And it feels Anyway, I really like this entire scene with Peter struggling to stop the stolen chemical truck while also trying to make it to Gwen's graduation. If you cut this movie down to this one scene, from this moment Spider-Man fades in to the second the graduation scene is over, this would make a banger short film. The problem is that the film keeps going. So during this scene of Peter saving all these lives and people and shit, you see Max Dillon, a worker at Oscorp whose work is being stolen and used by Oscorp without any credit to him. He's bullied by his coworkers, he isn't treated with an ounce of respect by anyone in his life, and then Spider-Man comes in, shows him a little too much attention while saving him, and now he's an obsessed Spider fan. The movie keeps trying to tell you that Max is just a person who wants to be seen, and this neglect from his peers is one that turns him into a villain. When he stumbles into Times Square's Electro, and all the billboards are turned on and put on him, he has this moment of euphoria. He is finally being seen by everyone around him, and he isn't just this nobody anymore. But the problem is that once again, the only reason that I know this is because I've burned these movies into the fucking back of my head, and I know the subtext. I understand the subtext. And I also know that they cut out a scene that would have established Max's feelings of abandonment in the beginning. This movie just doesn't do a good job of establishing Electro's need to be seen. There was one really good scene that was cut where you can see Max's mom treating him like shit as he tries to fix the house's electricity. And that's when you see why it actually makes sense, why Max acts like no one pays attention to him and he's constantly chasing after this need to be seen. It's because his mother didn't give a fuck about him. But did you know that until the autistic Spider-Man YouTuber told you? Well, I mean, there's like a 50% chance you're like a super Spider-Man fan. So you might have known. But still, general audiences didn't know that shit. So we already have one villain that's incredibly underdeveloped and has very shaky and loose footing. Let's add another one! I'm losing my fucking... There's like a scream warning I should have put on this video way earlier. So, after not at all being mentioned or even seen in the first movie, Harry Osborn is injected into the plot of this movie, and I really do mean injected. So in the first movie, they outright mention how Norman Osborn is dying, but they never say why. It turns out he's dying from a disease that turns him into a nasty-looking goblin man, and it's hereditary, so any child he has will have it too. Enter Harry Osborn, who's shoved into this movie just to be immediately told that he's dying from a disease he never even knew about. So, we have this character that we know nothing about, who's on a ticking time clock. All Harry needed is something to make his character meaningful to the audience. Something that puts you in the passenger seat right next to Harry and make you hope that he somehow survived. And that thing is pretending that he knew the main character the whole fucking time. So Harry is looking through some old files of his father's, and he finds a file on the spider research Norman Osborn and Richard Parker were doing, which leads him to believe that Spider-Man's blood can be used to cure his goblin AIDS. So he tells Peter that he needs to talk to Spider-Man, which he assumes that Peter can do because Peter took his picture for the Bugle. Which, even if Peter wasn't Spider-Man, it would still make no sense for him to assume that Peter knows Spider-Man. The paper literally reads, "First clear photo of Spider-Man." No one looking at this newspaper would immediately assume the photographer taking it knows Spider-Man. If anything, they would assume, wow, it's been however long this spider motherfucker has existed and they just now got a clear photo of him? He must not have a great relationship with the press. Not Harry Osborn, though. But anyway, Peter obliges, and he tells Harry that he's gonna try to find Spider-Man because he feels bad for his best friend. And then Peter obviously makes the smart choice, and he just pretends like he can't find Spider-Man until he thinks of a better idea. I'm lying to you. He goes to Harry's house in the Spider-Man costume and tells him no. Why? Why the fuck did you do this? You could have just pretended like you didn't find him. Instead, you just fucking started the inciting event that would kill your girlfriend. I don't need to tell you why this sucks. Like, I know most people know who Harry Osborn is due to the recency of the Raimi movies around the release of this movie, but even still, this doesn't mean that you can add a character into your movie without properly fleshing them out and figuring out how they fit into your world. So, both of the antagonists in this film suck, but at least you have Gwen and Peter's relationship from the first movie still here. While being a cute and dynamic duo, I feel that once again this is just another subplot for the movie that isn't really all that entertaining. Hello, Kai from the future cutting in to cut off old Kai, who is stupid and dumb and wrong. When I say this part of the movie isn't really as entertaining, I'm not really appropriately describing my feelings on it. I mean that it's not as narratively complex as I think it should be to be interesting on a plot level. Of course, it's still interesting because you get to see Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield acting together and doing their usual thing. That's the entertaining part. My problem, I guess, is just that the plot line that's going on isn't really one that's too complex or really all that interesting on a plot level. Peter and Gwen are will they won't theying, and then Gwen suddenly reveals that she's trying to get into Oxford and she's moving to England. And Peter is very upset about this until he suddenly decides, fuck it, I'll go to England with you. But at that very moment, the city's power goes out. So now, Spider-Man and Gwen have to team up to defeat Electro and the Green Goblin. This, of course, ends with Gwen's death. Now, there's no doubting it. This scene is sad, because it takes one of the best parts about this duology of movies and kills it in an incredibly cinematic and climactic scene. Gwen falls in slow-mo as the parts of the tower fall with her. Spider-Man shoots a web to catch her, trying desperately to reach out to her with his powers as if they were his own hands. She dies. Another soul is lost, and once again, Peter loses another person in his life. He quits being Spider-Man, and then all of a sudden he has one pep talk with Aunt May, and then he turns on his his Sony fucking computer, by the way, Sony fucking computer, and he watches Gwen's speech, and now he's up and at it being Spider-Man again. After rewatching these movies, it kind of makes you sad knowing where it all ends. With one lackluster film that's driven on with half of a cast of compelling characters, filled to the brim with complicated storylines that don't really tie into one another very well, with teasers meant to set up a cinematic universe that never came. Andrew Garfield's solo career as Spider-Man ends right here, with a movie that doesn't do justice to anyone but the main character, and even that is being generous. And honestly, it's the problem with the film. It doesn't really care about the environment around Spider-Man, it more cares about Spider-Man himself. While other characters like Aunt May and Gwen are done pretty well, the villains aren't, and I often find myself struggling with this same issue too. I don't really follow Peter's side characters and villains like that, and that's just because I only like Spider-Man. But that is the issue with just loving Spider-Man. To truly love Spider-Man, you have to love everything around him. And without that love, it sort of just feels like you're dating a girl whose family you refuse to meet. Or a boy. The Amazing Spider-Man series of movies is one that starts out really good, and doesn't stick the landing very well with the second one. These movies have tones almost completely unique from one another, with the first one being an edgy superhero movie about a boy trying to find his father, and after becoming a superhero, he realizes he really had one all along that he neglected. This pain turns around and makes him become more of a noble hero. The second movie follows up the first with a much brighter and more bombastic feel, with side plots that are honestly so bad I just recommend watching Spider-Man in this movie, and that's it. If you're feeling nostalgic about this movie, go on YouTube and just watch the opening scene with the swinging, and then stop watching the goddamn movie. Last time I ranked the Raimi movies in order of quality. but seeing as one movie is clearly better than the other here, I figure I'll just give him a number ranking. TASM 1 is an 8 out of 10 film for me. It's one of the most visually striking Spider-Man movies out there, and part of me honestly wishes that they didn't change so much about the look and feel when moving on to the second film. While I do enjoy the visuals, I can't let this movie's lackluster villain and ending slip past me. It would have worked much better if Kurt Connors had more backstory than just being the guy Peter's dad worked with. Oh yeah, by the way, he's also missing an arm. And the endings I proposed from earlier would have set up a second film much better. All in all, still a really good movie. The second one scores like a 5 out of 10, and that's being like extremely generous. It's only because I find like half of the movie really enjoyable. The visuals are great, Spider-Man lives up to the title of being amazing, Gwen and Peter are really cute, and I like the soundtrack of the movie. And the CGI is really good. But the villains are just god awful. They both look completely ugly and I hate their designs. And every time they come on screen, the plot of the movie turns into dog shit. There's one thing I can't shake about these movies. It's the protagonist. Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker has the following that he does for a reason. His take on Spider-Man is one that feels like much more of a real person than Tobey's did. And that's not to diss Tobey. I still love him and I think his series of movies are much greater. But you don't really get to see his past before he becomes Spider-Man. The moment that shapes him happens right there in the movie's runtime. But here, Andrew's Peter is someone who's suffered for a long, long time. Someone who's been lost for a long, long time. And this made him angry. And he only finds his true purpose after he can put that anger down and become something amazing. He said the thing. I said the thing. See, originally in the script, I was going to play it off like I'm all triumphant and serious and not cringe. No, that is cringe, so I'm going to talk over it and be satirical. Because everyone knows that if you just address the problem without solving it, that makes it better. Right, guys? I'm breaking the fourth wall. Subscribe to my YouTube. Leave a nasty hate comment about how I'm wrong and these movies suck. And you hate me, and you're gonna bomb my house, and you've botted 5 million bot accounts to dislike the video. Yeah. Sorry, I'm eating during the outro card. I gotta put on my film major hat that I have no degree for. And dissecting these plots, it takes forever. But anyway, next time, we're going to be covering the MCU movies, and I feel like this is a reoccurring theme for these videos, but it's going to be very positive at first, and then it's slowly going to become extremely negative as Tom Holland's character progresses. I'm just giving you a fair warning. I'm going to be shit-talking Tom Holland's adaptation of Spider-Man a lot in the next video. I'm gonna be shitting on him like I just drank Pepto-Bismol, okay? And I'll give you a little weather forecast of when all the diarrhea is gonna rain from the sky. So, Civil War, I'm gonna cover all the movies he appeared in too, but only a little bit. Civil War, really good. I really liked him in those movies. Homecoming is great. I'll still hold on to that idea. I think Homecoming is an amazing movie that has a lackluster ending that I'm of course going to cover in this movie. And then we're going to get to Far From Home. I still have to review my feelings about Far From Home. Of course, I still have issues with the film, but I want to give it a good rewatch before I straight up shit on it. And then finally, we're going to cover No Way Home. Probably is going to be a little controversial to talk about No Way Home in the same critical light that I've been talking about all these other films, but yeah, I'm gonna be incredibly critical next time. There's gonna be a lot of fucks and a lot of shits and a lot of farts. I don't know. Just stick around for next time, and I'm gonna be screaming a lot. See you next time.